Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Learning Kitchen Live. My name is Rachel. I'm a dietitian here with Community Servings, and I'm super excited to be making this rustic Tuscan kale, bean, and sausage soup for you all today. And before we jump into the recipe, which you can see I've already gotten started off camera, I do want to give the shout out that we are currently recruiting people with diabetes to participate in two exciting food as medicine studies here at Community Servings. So if that's something that might be of interest to you, check out the food as medicine link, which is posted in the comments of today's video. So today I chose to do this really hearty, delicious, nutritious soup because one, it's all of a sudden gotten way colder out, and I grew up eating this in the fall. My mom would make it for me, or my family, and it's just delicious and warming. So where we're at currently is that I have sauteed and cut up the sausage and browned it off in the pot. Today we're using a chicken Italian sausage, which is something that I chose because chicken tends to be lower in saturated fat than other sausage meat alternatives. So thinking like the red meat, so the pork, the beef. However, if cardiovascular health is not something that your doctor has talked with you about working towards, you are more than welcome to use any meat of your preference. A fun fact about sausage is that it date back almost 5,000 years ago, and it's thought to be, or it's thought to have come about as a way of preserving meat with sausage or with sodium or salt and spices. And so that kind of gives you another heads up on one of the other caveats to sausage, which is that it's going to be higher in sodium. And so today I'm not using a ton of added salt into this meal because the sausage is already going to be contributing a lot of the sodium. So after I got the sausage going in this pot, browning it up about 10 minutes, I then added my onions, carrots, bay leaves, and onions, and potatoes. So what I did is when I was cutting up these ingredients, specifically the carrots, onions, and potatoes, in my mind what I was thinking about is what size do I want these things to be when someone is eating this on the spoon? And I think this answer is going to be different for everyone, depending on your personal texture preference. However, what I've chosen to do is a half coin carrot, a slightly smaller potato cut, and a diced onion, which I don't know if you can see that on the camera. I prefer to have a little bit of everything on each bite, so those smaller cuts are going to help that. But also, since we're cooking on camera today, I just wanted to make sure that everything was going to cook at a slightly faster rate, which is what we're going to get the smaller that we cut a ingredient. So the bigger it is, the longer it takes to cook. So now we've actually been cooking this concoction for about 10-ish minutes. You can see that the veggies have started to soften. It's really fragrant. You can smell the bay leaf and the sausage and the onions especially, and it smells really fall-like. So now what we're going to do is move on to the next step, which I have some canned beans here. Today I was choosing between white beans, and I went for a cannellini bean. The cannellini bean is going to be a little bit heartier and stand up to the cooking a little bit more than, say, like a navy bean, which is going to get a little bit more creamy of a texture as it starts to cook, and lends itself really well to like dips rather than soups. But beans in general are going to really contribute some nice fiber to this meal, as well as some extra protein in addition to the sausage that we already have going. Beans, I'm sure you've heard this before, but beans are going to be a great source of protein, but especially when you pair them with a whole grain. Because what happens when you pair a whole grain and a bean together is that the combination of those two foods actually provides you all the amino acids, or in other words, the building blocks of protein that your body needs to do all of its, protein functioning. The reason why you hear about animal proteins being such a good source of protein is because they are inherently a complete protein source, or they inherently have all those amino acids already present in them. But plant-based sources are just as good as long as you're being aware of pairing them with each other to make them complete. I'm also going to add some garlic at this stage to add some flavor. The thing about garlic, why I didn't add it earlier, is because garlic has a tendency to burn. And so by adding it a little bit later in the steps, we're really going to assure that the flavor is going to come through and it's not going to be singed, which is a concern if we had added it during the sausage stage. And so this meal is going to have a lot of different colors in it, right? So we have the green from the bay leaves, we have some white from the potatoes and the beans, orange from the carrots. We're going to be adding some kale for the green. And what that tells us actually is that this meal is going to have a lot of different nutrients in it, which is really cool. So color can kind of be an indicator of different nutrients. So for example, carrots, they're going to have this lovely bright orange color, and that's going to be indicative of vitamin A precursor. So you might hear, people say, eat carrots because they're good for your eyes. Vitamin A is good for your eyes, as well as tissue health in general. So that's going to be why you might have heard that. Okay, perfect. So now I'm starting to smell that garlic. Everything's starting to kind of come together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to prepping the kale. And you can actually see that right here I've already kind of chopped it into these like nice sized pieces, which incidentally are also the size that I like my kale chips to be when I make these at home. But just a really nice bite size. Kale is going to hold up a little bit better compared to some other leafy greens when you're cooking them, especially compared to like a spinach, which I would add later in the process. But kale is a little bit more fibrous and is really going to hold its own as you're cooking and boiling it and lend a really nice like earthy flavor. So the thing is that when we're cooking it, typically we're going to want to remove the stem, which is super fibrous. Incidentally, you are able to eat it, especially if you're going to be cooking it for a long period of time. But right now, for our purposes, I'm gonna strip it out and show you how to do that. So I learned this when I was working on a farm, actually, and we stripped a lot of kale. So what I like to do is I like to take the leaf, and at the very bottom, you'll see where, it's the smallest amount of leaf is connected to the stem. And what I like to do is I like to rip that little bit away just to get you started, and then hold the stem in one hand at the base, and then run your hands up the top of the kale to remove the leaf cleanly from the stem. This is going to be a little bit quicker than cutting the leaf from the stem, and you're left with this like really nice intact leaf, which then I'll show you how I like to cut it. So let's go ahead and do the same thing on this other leaf. So remember, grabbing the base and pulling upwards. So then I like to cut these in half, tear them in half so you have two about equal sized pieces. And then we're going to do a ribbon cut. So I'm going to kind of layer these all together so that they're on top of each other and roll them up. And rolling them up is going to really help us be able to control this cut. So what I like to do is I like to do one across, and then I'm probably going to do one more, so making an X. And what you'll see is that you have this nice stack of really uniform cut kale that's in a nice bite-sized piece. So that is a nice trick to kind of take home with you if you ever need to make kale. It's going to be really nice if you're using it in a salad because it's a little bit more bite-sized, but also be uniform. But for today's purposes, we're going to add this into the pot. and let it wilt a little bit. Okay. And then we're also going to add our chicken stock. So I've used chicken today. Actually, no, I use vegetable. You can really use anything you want. The only thing to be kind of cognizant of is, once again, the sodium. So broths are usually going to be flavored with a ton of sodium in general. You can look for lower sodium options, or a fun idea is that you can actually make your own, which might sound daunting, but is actually super easy. And I'm going to walk you all through how to do that in a second. I'm just going to go get some more water. I'll be right back. All right, so all that a broth or a stock really is water that's been flavored with some sort of ingredient. So, and then the ingredient is strained out. So when I like to make stock at home, what I do is I will keep my vegetable cuttings. Just like, I've skinned the carrots today, so I have all the carrot skins, carrot tops, basically kind of like the inedible parts of the vegetable that still are edible. So the kale stalks, for example. And then what I like to do is I like to put these in a freezer bag, and I put them in the freezer and basically accumulate them until I'm at, I have maybe a freezer bag or two of, vegetable trimmings. And then I literally will put it in a big pot with a bunch of water, bring the water to a boil with these scraps in it, and I just let it go for a few hours. And what you're doing is really infusing the flavor of these vegetables into the water. And it really imparts a really lovely vegetable flavor into the broth, which you can then use in your own soups. And if you don't add any sodium, it's actually going to be a really, really low sodium option. Sodium only coming from maybe some of like the plants that are in there. So that is one option if you don't, or if you're watching your sodium intake but still want to cook soups with stocks. So all I'm going to do now is bring it up to a boil. You cover it, and you then can walk away as long as you're monitoring it to make sure nothing's burning or on fire. So that is it. I'm going to probably let this go anywhere from 40 minutes to a few hours. The longer you boil it for, or simmer it for, I should say, the more concentrated the flavor is going to be. The potatoes are actually going to start to thicken the broth, and it's really going to cook down into a beautiful, flavorful, nutritious soup that's perfect for the fall. So you can check back in the comments for a finished photo of this soup, but I'm going to let this boil, and I'll leave you all there. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Learning Kitchen Live. Once again, if you're interested in the study, please check out the link posted in the comments below. And I hope to see you back here next week for Learning Kitchen Live. Bye-bye.